You know, the song is really true. Everybody hurts. You know, everybody hurts sometimes, and everybody feels alone sometimes, and we just have to hang on. You know, and that's what really the lesson of the solstice is, actually. So thank you, Fine, for your authenticity, your vulnerability, and you're just beautiful. You're a beautiful human being. So I want to start my talk with a story. And all good stories start with the words "once upon a time," and so is this one. So it says, "Once upon a time, there lived people who loved the light. As soon as the sun rose every morning, they were up to welcome it, singing songs of celebration for the light. And when the sun went down each evening, they sang other songs, sad songs, songs of missing the light of the sun. They loved the light so very much. They did not love the darkness. Once darkness fell every night, they would hurry to bed since they could only bear the darkness when they were asleep. But even then, total darkness was frightening to them, and so they always kept a fire burning in every room. And the people's dearest wish was that the sun would not set in the evening, that darkness would never fall. But every day the sun set and they sang their sad songs, and they endured the fearful, sad, strange darkness until they could greet the sun again the next day. Now into this land were born two remarkable children. They were twins. One was a girl, and she seemed to shine from within. Whenever she entered a room, everything seemed to get a little brighter, and the people loved her very much. And the other child was a boy, and he seemed to bring darkness with him. Whenever he entered a room, everything seemed a little bit dimmer, and the people did not like him. They feared him because he reminded them of the great darkness of the night. But although the people loved the little girl so much and did not love the boy, the twins loved each other very much. And because the girl loved her brother so very much, the people mostly just kind of let him be, even though they were afraid of him. Now, as they grew, it became clear that these children were in fact magical children. The girl had the power to bring life back when it was harmed or lost. When she was a very small child, she could heal small cuts and bruises, and when she grew a little older, she could heal broken bones and other larger hurts, and by the time she was a teenager, she could make the crops grow faster and larger and fuller. The boy, on the other hand, had the power to calm and quiet everything. When he was a very small child, he could help his family fall to sleep more quickly, thus saving them from the fear of the darkness. And when he was a little older, he could calm animals when they were frightened and make them still. Sometimes he would go first to an animal or a person who was hurt and help them be calm enough for his sister's healing magic. And by the time he was a teenager, he could calm storms and winds and rains, and he could bring anything to stillness. The people's love for the light and fear of the darkness only grew with time, perhaps more strongly with the twins always before them to remind them. And so one day they decided to ask the girl for a favor. They asked her to see if her magic could hold the sun in the sky and stop the night from coming. And the girl was reluctant, but after many, many months of being asked, she finally decided to try, just to get the people to leave her alone. So one day, just as the sun was at its highest point in the sky, she went out to the top of the highest hill in the land, and she threw her arms up to the sky and asked the sun to stop, to stay right there at the top of the sky forever. And the sun stopped in the sky. The people were overjoyed. There was a big celebration. They sang all their songs celebrating the sun, and they loved the little girl even more, at least at first. For the first week or so, everyone was very happy and content. But soon they began to get tired. Although they had always slept with a fire to ward off the darkness, sleeping in the full light of sun was a whole nother thing. They tossed and turned and woke up constantly. Some of them remembered that the boy could help with sleep, so they asked for his aid, but his power of bringing sleep seemed to have disappeared along with the darkness. After about a month, the exhausted, frustrated people began to see that this constant sunlight was a problem. Each person at first thought that they were the only one who thought this, and given the love of the light and the fear of the darkness, everyone was afraid at first to say anything about this growing longing for nighttime. But slowly and softly they began to confide in each other, and they discovered that everyone felt this way. So they finally decided that something must be done. So they went back to the girl and asked her to get to the sun to move on. It was her magic that had stopped it, and they figured maybe her magic could make it move again. So she went back up to the top of the highest hill, and she threw her arms up to the sky and asked the sun to move. Nothing happened. She tried again, but the sun stayed still, and sadly she turned to the people and said, "There was nothing I can do. There's nothing I can do." And there was a long moment of growing panic before the little boy stepped forward and said, "Let me try. Let me try," he said softly. So he took his sister's place at the top of the highest hill. He threw his arms up to the sky and he asked the sun to move, and the sun began moving at once, rushing towards the horizon, and within 10 minutes it had set, and within 15 it was full dark night. And the people were caught off guard. They had all come out on the hill to see if the girl's magic would work, and they had not lit any fires. They hadn't needed them in weeks. They had nothing to help them light their way. They had never been outside at night before, and they were terrified. At first they tried rushing home to get away from the darkness, but they soon discovered that rushing when you can't see where you're going is not a very good idea. So they slowed down, but they still appeared at the ground, trying to get home as soon as they could. But then one of them looked up. "Oh," she exclaimed, "look, look." Everyone looked up, and what they saw was all the stars for the first time. They had never been outside at night before, and they had no idea of the incredible beauty of a sky full of stars. And so they all stopped hurrying towards their home and stood and stared in wonder. And then they realized how very tired they were. So slowly now, with more reverence, they started home again. And they all slept for a very long time. The people rested and were glad and appreciated the darkness for the first time in their lives. And eventually the sun rose again, and as it did, the people got out of their beds and they sang their songs to celebrate the coming of the light. But the end of that day, as the sun began to sink towards the horizon, they did not feel like singing their sad songs. Instead, one of the musicians began singing a new song, a slow, quiet song of thanksgiving for the night. And soon the others joined in, and it became their new sunset song. And the boy and the girl grew up to be a man and woman, and both of them were very much beloved by the people. Looking at them, still the best of friends as well as siblings, the people remembered that light and darkness are best in balance. So what a beautiful story to illustrate the natural blessing of both the dark and the light. The light and the dark have blessings for us. And I don't know about you, but sometimes I find it hard to appreciate darkness. You know, especially as the nights kind of grow longer this time of year and the sun's gone so fast. And since I knew I was going to be talking about the winter solstice today, I decided to do a little bit of research about it. And I was watching a TED Talk this week about why we need darkness. I think that's what it was called. And you may or may not know that meadowlarks, Kathy, you might know, meadowlarks sing to the rising sun as a way to attract a mate. And the scientists were filming the meadowlarks outside of Rapid City in South Dakota. And they were filming these meadowlarks who were confused by the light of the city on the horizon. And this little bird was singing the mating call at 2 a.m. Way too early to attract a mate. And actually, I think that's probably a good rule for all of us. Mating call 2 a.m. might not be the best time to make contact. But anyway, the point was that the lights of the city were unnatural, and they were throwing off the wildlife. See, nature needs darkness. You know, there are nocturnal plants like the moonflower. Have you ever seen a moonflower? They're just beautiful, and they only bloom in darkness. And there are nocturnal animals, as we know, like owls, that do most of their active living in darkness. And there are people actually whose life work right now is to protect natural darkness in the world. They've got these big movements going on about stopping so much artificial light at night. So I find that really interesting and important work, because I think it's especially interesting to us as we approach the winter solstice And the daylight gets shortest this time of year in our hemisphere at any rate. Just as there are benefits to the natural physical world, I believe that there are benefits to darkness in our own experiences too. And the solstice is kind of the perfect time to explore these concepts. So you may or may not know, but the longest night will be the 21st, and then the solstice is the 22nd. So this is the week we're leading up to the solstice having longer and longer periods of darkness. So the winter solstice is the shortest day of the year and the longest night, and it officially marks the start of winter. Solstices are one of the oldest known holidays in human history. Anthropologists believe, I thought this was stunning, that solstice celebrations go back at least 30,000 years. They have been marking the solstice. And we've all seen photos and of the structures around the world that ancient human beings used to celebrate and track and pinpoint the precise date of the solstice. Stonehenge is the most famous example of that. They were placed to receive the first rays of the midwinter sun. So the winter solstice marks the beginning of the solar year, and cultures use this particular time of year as a celebration of light and the rebirth of the sun. And many cultures will observe this day with ritual and celebration because it truly is an ancient holiday. See, the ancient people, they didn't have the knowledge we have of astronomy, so it appeared to them that the sun and moon just stopped their flight across the sky as the longest night of the year just seemed to last and last. And the night was recognized as, many centuries ago, as the birthday of the sun god Mithra, because out of the darkest night, the sun was born from the goddess. And it was a time of both anticipation and rejoicing, and they built bonfires on the hillsides to guide the sun to its birth. And you may know that many of our current December holidays are kind of rose out of these solstice celebrations from ancient days. It's kind of in our DNA, y'all. It's in our DNA to recognize the significance of the balance between darkness and light. Right? When the first few months of winter came, they were very hard on the people. It got darker and colder, and food got more scarce, brought famine and starvation, and they just couldn't wait for the light to return. And it started on the night when everything was in perfect balance. So they took this opportunity to thank the sun for beginning its return on the winter solstice. Right? So in a real sense, the sun begins its journey toward longer days, times of new growth, and renewal of the world once again. It's the first day of that long march towards spring. So let's look at the spiritual meaning behind this natural phenomenon. What does darkness really mean to us emotionally and spiritually? You know, we have a phrase that we use. We say we're in the dark. Oh, I'm in the dark about that. I'm in the dark. And what we mean when we say that is what? We're uncomfortable, right? We don't have the information we need. I'm limited in the amount of information I have, or I'm confused right now. I can't see the way forward. I'm in the dark. It's a phrase we use when we feel we need to pause and get more information before we take the next step. We recognize our ignorance when we say that we're in the dark. Here's a quote from Barbara Brown Taylor. She said, "I have learned things in the dark that I could have never learned in the light. Things that have saved my life over and over again, so that there is really only one logical conclusion. I need darkness as much as I need light." Think of all the things you've learned in the dark that have saved your life over and over again. Because being in the dark is a universal experience. We all have situations in our lives and moments along the way when we feel like our knowledge is limited and our vision for going forward is not clear. We all have that experience. So often when we find ourselves in a dark place, it seems natural that we would feel the fear that the people in the opening story were feeling. We don't want to move into situations in the dark. The dark just kind of symbolizes the unknown. In the proverbial dark, we don't know what's ahead on the path. We can't see the way forward. We don't have the information we need to make a clear decision. Sometimes the world can seem cold and uncaring when we find ourselves in these dark moments. And just like the people of ancient times, we can feel starved and cold in the dark. But it is in the dark moments of life that we get to decide whether or not we believe that darkness is the only truth, that fear is the only option, or whether we can believe that the light is coming and faith is our best choice. So I want to share that, I have purposely been choosing some dark time in my life recently. I've been diving into some really deep personal work lately, and I actually have used the word hibernate to describe this gut feeling I have, this craving I have to withdraw from my natural tendency to be really social and really out there. I'm outwardly focused a whole lot. So when I was trying to balance the job at the home office, and I was trying to balance all this here and my move and shifting in my life, I felt this deep urge inside to pull inward, to pull in. I wanted to feel the emotional waves that I was experiencing without being pulled in so many different directions. I find myself wanting to surround myself with softness and simple food and quiet and silence. I want to journal and I want to meditate and I want to read, and frankly, sometimes I don't recognize myself. I don't recognize myself, my choices in my own life right now. So I'm just wanting to pull in. And thankfully I have several friends who kind of meet me in the silence and meet me in the darkness sometimes, and they encourage me. They're encouraging me to take this time for myself right now. And one of them was listening to my vulnerability earlier this week, and she asked me this stunning question, because I was questioning my faith and questioning everything, and she stopped me in my tracks when she said, "What kind of a religious scientist are you?" She said, "No, I'm a minister." "What kind of a religious scientist are you?" And she goes, "No, I'm serious, I want you to answer the question." And I'm like, "Well, I study this philosophy, I teach it, and I also try to practice it and live by the principles." And she said, "Stop, hold on. Did you say the word practice? Did you say that you're practicing these principles?" That's what all of us get to do every day, is practice the principles. And she reminded me that the dark side of the science of mind, this philosophy we teach, the dark side of it is perfectionism. It's perfectionism. And she said, sometimes we fool ourselves into thinking that if we have enough faith, if we really understand and can embody these principles, these unchanging, impersonal, spiritual principles thoroughly enough, we will not have experiences of darkness and doubt and fear. We can use the principles to shame ourselves instead of shore ourselves up. Perfectionism is the idea that if we look perfect, we will somehow cover up our humanity. No one will notice that we're in the dark, right? But we must grow, and much growth starts and occurs in darkness. Think about it. Think about the darkness inside a seed, where everything is germinating in the darkness of the pod. The butterfly inside the dark cocoon forms itself and becomes itself in the dark. Babies grow in the darkness of the womb. When we find ourselves in darkness, we're invited to remember that we have entered a natural time of change and growth. The change may start in the darkness, but once the light appears and once the light returns, the visible transformation of the change becomes evident, and it can be tremendous. Holmes says this: "It is in this moment of time that we are to make the great decision. It is in this day in which we now are living that we must choose what path we are to follow. Shall we live in fear or in faith? Shall we live in confusion or in the peace that comes from a deep and abiding conviction that there is a power greater than we are, ready, willing, and able to work for us? In this day,
in this darkness. In a spiritual sense, the winter solstice is our reminder that in order for a new path to begin, the old one must end, and that the light of the spring will come again. It's a call for renewal of our faith and an urging to walk toward a brighter future. That's what the solstice is. And if we follow the patterns of nature, they will tell us that one must go within and experience the darkness and silence to have a rebirth. Not just once a year, but each moment we want to experience a newness of being. So the question becomes, what part of your life has you feeling like you're in the dark of the unknown? As you approach the solstice this week, and nature shows you its darkest night, how can you allow your soul to explore the concept of darkness in your own experience? Can you take something important in your life into the silent darkness and then walk it into greater light as you awaken to a new awareness? Let's use this time as a reminder that we should absolutely cherish our seasons of darkness. Why? Because they don't last. They don't last. Remember, the winter solstice is the point of balance between the darkness and the growing light of the new solar year. Every holiday at this time of year, whether it's Kwanzaa or Hanukkah or Christmas, they all celebrate light. Light is the truth of our being. I want to read what Holmes put in the Science of Mind glossary about light. It was too long to put on the screen. Light was the first great revelation of divine creative energy that called all living things into being. Let there be light, and there was light. There is a healing light in the rays of the sun, but how much greater is the healing power which Jesus recognized in himself and others when he said, I am the light of the world. He that followeth me shall not walk in darkness, but shall have the light of life. He that loveth his brother abideth in the light. Ye are the lights of the world. He said clearly, when we love each other, we abide in the light. The light is love. Celebrating the triumph of light over the increasing darkness gave the ancient people hope. And every single one of us has celebrated something in our lives many times when the darkness of confusion or limitation has given way to the light of hope, to the light of possibility, and to the light of creativity and love. All of us have had that experience, and this year is no different. Each one of us, I guarantee it, is experiencing something that makes us feel dark, and yet we will all continue to move forward to greater understanding. We will find our faith in the divine. We will move towards the trust that love is all there is. In the Psalms, they wrote, weeping may endure for a night, but joy cometh in the morning. The return of light reassures us. Sunlight allows us to see more clearly, with more detail, with more color, and light is primarily soothing. The light is there. So my daughter, Kelsey, when she was really little, very young, she had a night light that projected a rainbow onto the wall in her room, in her bedroom wall. She wasn't afraid of the dark, actually. She just loved the light, and she loved this rainbow light. So one night, a group of friends of mine and I were having a party of some sort. I don't know. There were people over, and I had tucked her into bed and came back down, rushed back downstairs to be with my friends, and we were hanging out in the living room. And at some point, I just kind of glanced up, and there was a little railing up there with a landing. And there stood my daughter in her cutie little nightgown, standing there just looking down silently, not making a sound. She wanted to stand there a while, right? She was watching the fun. And as any mom would do, I looked up at her and got kind of firmly, Kelsey, you go right back to bed. And indignant, and just as firmly, she said back down to me, rainbow. So in my haste to go back down to my friends, I had forgotten to put her rainbow nightlight on. And she was having nothing of that. So, needless to say, I marched back upstairs and turned the rainbow light on. But these days, as I'm struggling and I'm sitting in the dark, I just want to say to Spirit, rainbow. In fact, that's what I'm going to say from now on. But something is reborn in us with the return of the light. There's something about the light that just calms us down, and we are reacquainted with possibility and with resilience and with vision as the light returns. And that's what happens. We can be stuck in something confusing and challenging, and then something happens, and suddenly we feel the light kind of come on within us. And in that instance, we are able to breathe, and we can see more clearly. And we see possibilities that we couldn't see 5 minutes before, but then all of a sudden it breaks open. And the light comes on because something shifts in our consciousness. Most of the time we need help with that. Most of the time it's hard to get out and find the light alone. We need someone to remind us of our true identity. We need to come into a group like this and be reminded once a week, at least once a week. Hear the light. The light's here, right? We just want to be comforted. We just want someone to listen to us as we work through these limiting beliefs and fears. And I'll remind you, candles don't light themselves. Someone must light them. We need each other to make the darkness bearable, or perhaps even comforting. And when we can do that for each other, joy does come in the morning. Love comes through lighting each other's candles. And I'm going to close with a reading. It's an abbreviated excerpt from A Celebration of Winter Solstice, of Life by Joyce Rupp and Macarena Whitaker. This is what it says. It says, there is a tendency to want to hurry from autumn to spring, to avoid the long dark days that winter brings. Many people do not like constant days bereft of light and months filled with colder temperatures. They struggle with the bleakness of land and the emptiness of trees. That's why we moved to Florida. Anyway, their eyes and hearts seek color. Their spirits tire of tasting the endless gray skies. There is great rejoicing in the thought that light and warmth will soon be filling more and more of each day. But winter darkness has a positive side to it. As we gather to celebrate the first turn from winter to spring, we are invited to recognize and honor the beauty in the often unwanted season of winter. Let us invite our hearts to be glad for the courage winter proclaims. Let us be grateful for the wisdom winter brings in teaching us about the need for withdrawal as an essential part of renewal. Let us encourage our spirits as earth prepares to come forth from this time of withdrawal into a season filled with light. The winter solstice celebrates the return of hope to our land as our planet experiences the first slow turn toward greater daylight. Soon we will welcome the return of the sun and the coming of springtime. And as we do so, let us remember and embrace the positive, enriching aspects of winter's darkness. So pause this week to sit in the silence of this darkness of this space. Let this space be a safe enclosure of creative gestation for you. We can use this winter solstice and its message of the coming light to give thanks for the year that's been, to remember loved ones, and to shine a light for the year ahead. I celebrate the return of the light in my life every day with joy. May that be your affirmation. And so it is.